just in case anybody out there isn't aware, this coming November, well, so earlier this year, the school board voted to place a half-cent sales tax referendum on the November ballot, this upcoming November.
Right.
So on the ballot, voters in Lee County will have the option of voting to raise the sales tax locally here from 6% on the dollar to 6.5%. And that would generate approximately $59 million a year.
Approximately $59 million a year, yes.
And that money would go to the school district to benefit the students. We'll go over what the money would be used for in a minute, but can you explain to us how we got to this point, that this would be deemed necessary?
Absolutely. The way we got here is that we have seen a reduction in our capital funding over the last decade or actually more, particularly since we came out of the recession. So if you go back to 2006, 2007, we had capital dollars coming in excess of $318 million. Those are dollars that are brought to the district to pay for new building, maintenance, technology, security, et cetera. Now, just go back just a year ago, 2016, 2017, only $118 million coming in. That's a $200 million difference in just a decade. Okay, now, why is that? Well, you saw a reduction in taxes that come in from, assessing property. A reduction from 2.0 mils down to 1.5 mils, or really instead of $2 for every $1,000 of assessed value, $1.50. So we're taking in less there. Reduction of PICO dollars, reduction of impact fees. All that has resulted in a dramatic reduction in income. At the same period of time, the number of students coming into this district continues to increase. We're looking at anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 kids coming into our school district every single year, if you can believe that. That's the size of a high school every year. So we have to continue to build to be able to keep up with that growth. But the dollars to accomplish the building that we need to do just simply aren't there anymore. So that's how we got here.
So you've got funding going down, enrollment going up.
Correct.
What kind of problems, issues, impacts has that created?
Well, what we're seeing overcrowding, particularly in the East Zone and the South Zone. So you're seeing schools that have a capacity of, like, let's say 1,800 students at like Lehigh Senior High School that now have like 2,300 students. That means they have a building where the cafeteria is not large enough, they don't have enough classroom space, they get crowded in the hallways. We have to do something to alleviate those types of problems. So deploying more and more portables, which cost somewhere in the neighborhood about $67,000 just to deploy one, that's only a temporary solution. It's not a long-term solution to our growth, because a portable at best is only going to last 10 years. And so we really need to alleviate growth. The other thing I failed to mention was that we're seeing an increase in class size as we're trying to cram more students into a building with less space, and that is also something that we're trying to avoid.
So would you say this is the key, the biggest issue facing the school district at this moment?
Growth is certainly the biggest. The biggest issue facing our school district right now is handling the rapid growth that we have in our school district. Because not only are we wrestling with an addition of 1,500 to 2,000 students per year, but actually, if you look at the real numbers there, you're talking about 5,000 to 7,000 new students that come in and out of this district every single year. The total number increases, but you're still seeing that tremendous mobility and that tremendous growth, which presents a number of challenges. Staying up with capacity, just one of them.
Mm-hmm. So we've had to borrow money. Mm-hmm. Now, where do we stand? Well, you mentioned capital funding. Can you explain to people who may not be aware the difference between, so we have two different budgets, right?
Right.
Capital and operational.
Correct.
Can you explain the difference between capital and operational?
Sure. Our capital budget is used for building infrastructure, such as building new buildings, adding on to existing buildings, doing maintenance, adding technology, and also security. Operations, on the other hand, is just that, operating the school district, so paying salaries. paying insurance, paying for classroom materials, and so forth. So the majority of that goes toward really supporting our teachers, support staff, and administrators, whereas the capital, the majority of that goes toward actually supporting the infrastructure of the buildings.
So if the sales tax referendum were to pass, the money generated would go just to capital.
Correct. It would go just to capital. So it would go to new construction, technology, increasing security, and also helping our maintenance of our existing buildings.
And we're currently facing, we have a pretty large capital funding gap at the moment that we're facing, right?
Right.
Where do we stand?
Well, if we build everything that we really need to build to keep up with growth in the next 5 years, we have a gap of about $478 million. So in other words, between the amount of revenue we have coming in versus what we need to pay for those new buildings and the maintenance of those buildings, a gap of $478 million in just the next 5 years.
That sounds substantial.
Right. It is substantial. It is substantial.
So let's say the half-cent sales tax referendum passes in November.
Mm-hmm.
We would get approximately, based on estimates, $59 million a year. And
Right.
you just kind of went through a short list of what the money would go towards, but can we kind of break that down a little bit more? Can you talk a little bit more about, maybe a little bit more specifically where the money would go? Because I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in hearing about
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, the school board has made it really clear that we need to make sure that we're spending on safety and security in every one of our buildings. So making sure that all of our buildings have a single point of entry, making sure that we have the buzz-in video surveillance system in all of our buildings, making sure that our cameras are adequately maintained, those type of things that are done to harden a building. The second thing that we would be doing is focusing on new construction. So again, 6 new projects in terms of new buildings being built, 2 elementary schools, 2 middle schools. We have another high school, a couple renovations or tear down renovation and an addition. So all of that has to be built. And then the maintenance of all of these buildings. So if you think about all of our buildings, we have over 799 buildings right now currently. We have like more than 90-some schools. Each one of those schools has specific needs. It might be carpet, it might be a re-roof, it might be a chiller plant. A lot of our chillers, our HVAC systems are aging right now, and those have to be replaced. Replacing one of those can cost you anywhere from $3 to $4.5 million. So all of our buildings have certain capital needs, some more than others. The older the building, the more capital needs it has, but they all have something, whether it's safety and security upgrades or major infrastructure improvements. So new construction and the maintenance of existing. And then I failed to mention technology. Technology is a big piece of this. And one of the things that's really, really important, we're trying to prepare our kids for the workforce of not just today, but also tomorrow. And in order to do that, our kids have to have up-to-date equipment, up-to-date technology. We would do them a disservice if we train them on antiquated technology and then they turn around, they go try to apply for a job and they don't have the skills necessary because we haven't kept up. So all of that is what we'd be using this for.
How would you explain both the short-term and the long-term benefits of having this capital funding available?
Well, the short-term benefits, first and foremost, is our kids would be in really high-quality facilities across the entire school district. You don't want to get yourself in a situation like some other states and some other districts have got themselves in, where you have haves and have-nots. Some students going to schools that are really subpar, while others are going to schools that are really, extremely desirable. So that's what I see as both a short-term and a long-term benefit. The technology that I mentioned, that is something that can have, again, a short-term benefit really right out of the gates, because kids would have an opportunity to start working right with that new technology, right with that new equipment. So I think that, and then of course the safety and security is something that as soon as something's implemented, we're making our schools safe That goes without saying that that's an immediate improvement.
Now, there would not only be benefits to the school district, but could potentially be benefits to the Lee County community as a whole, right?
Yeah, I mean, I hear almost every day from our business partners, our community leaders, the need for trained workers and how we still have a gap between what comes out of our educational system and what goes into the workforce. So if I'm an employer, knowing that kids in the school district of Lee County are going to class and where you have state-of-the-art equipment with state-of-the-art instruction, that they're getting the skills that they need to be successful, I'm going to get excited about that, because that means, I don't have to go searching everywhere for the worker that I need. I can get it right from a school district of Lee County student who's graduating. So, it's been demonstrated in research study after research study that a quality education is the number one economic driver for a community. And I think that we sometimes lose sight of that. But if we invest in a high quality education, we improve the economy locally, we reduce crime, we reduce poverty. It just really improves the quality of life in Lee County.
Having high quality schools in neighborhoods increases property values. I know studies show that, right?
Absolutely, it sure does. I was recently looking at a study from California, and you had significant increase in property values in those school districts that have a bond issue, is what they call it in California, and they compared it to school districts that did not see this, and school districts that failed to pass their referendums did not reap the benefits, whereas the school districts that did, you saw increased property values and improvement in the quality of life. So yeah, and that's just one of many studies.
And we wouldn't be the first school district in Florida to pass a referendum like this.
That's what's most ironic here in my mind, is that if you look at across the school districts of Florida, most of them have some type of surtax that supports education. So most communities in the state of Florida have invested in education. And here's the other thing that I think is really striking, is if you look at the 6 school districts in our state that are growing as rapidly as we are the only one that does not have a surtax to help support our growth. The only one. So I really feel that in a way our kids are getting shortchanged here because they don't have the support that other students have, not only in this state but also across the nation.
So some people might be wondering, why a sales tax? Why are there not other means of generating revenue for the school district without taxing or raising taxes on people? I mean, we live in a conservative area,
right?
People don't like having their taxes raised.
Sure.
So why not raising impact fees or property taxes or using the Florida lottery money to help generate revenue? I mean, these are some questions that some people might be wondering.
Well, let's look at those, quickly. First of all, lottery is probably is an extremely regressive tax that is really misunderstood. Lottery is something that's very expensive to administer, and a lot of what the lottery takes in, a lottery has to pay out in administrative fees and also in prizes. So the amount of dollars that we get for the lottery just runs our school district like a day and a half. That's it, a day and a half. Now, the other impact fees. Impact fees, very small number of dollars here. It's it's basically on new construction only, so you're not raising a lot. If we raise it to 100%, it may raise us an additional maybe $9 million at the most. And then finally, property taxes. We used to be at 2.0 mils. If we went back to that, we would probably raise an additional $39 million, but that burden would be borne purely by our property owners. So, we get a lot of tourism in this community. And, these tourists come down, and we don't, it's great that they come down here. They spend their dollars in our stores. They visit our beaches. They add to our community. But they also add things that cost our school district, such as all that traffic on the road, which increases our bus ride times. It takes longer for us to get a bus to and from school, which means we're we're spending more in fuel, we're spending more on the driver, paying more overtime costs. So that's a cost to the district. If you do a referendum that's a half-penny sales tax, that's a tax that's passed on not just to your property owners, but it's also passed on to everyone else who spends money in Lee County. And it's a small amount. If you think about the average family, $50,000 a year family of four, it would be $64. I mean, that's what you're talking about per year. Big purchase, it gets capped at the first $5,000. So if you go out and buy that big pickup truck for a huge price tag, it's still only going to cost $25 in additional tax. Doesn't tax fuel, doesn't tax medicine, doesn't tax food. So I think, this is something that's pretty reasonable, but yet for the school district brings in $59 million. So way more than lottery, way more than impact fees, way more than property tax. Still doesn't close the gap in terms of the dollars that we need, but it's the one that goes the furthest.
What about some kind of bond? Would that have been an option?
Well, the bonds, we do borrow money through what's called COPS, which are certificates of participation, which is a bond. The problem with a bond is while it's a really good financial vehicle, there's a low interest rate there, it's still a debt. And so what happens is you've got a debt that's stretched out for maybe 30 years. Our kids that we're educating today would actually be the ones paying that debt off in the future. And I think it would be more responsible for us if we were just to move down or go down an avenue that pays for this right now, invest in Lee County, invest in these schools rather than
instead of literally passing the buck.
Instead of literally passing the buck.
Might have just stolen your line. Sorry.
No, that's fine, but that's absolutely correct. It's passing the buck on to the very kids that we're educating, and I think there's a better way.
So how would you respond to critics? And we know they're out there who criticize the district for not being fiscally responsible, saying, well, we got ourselves into this situation to begin with. How do you respond to them?
Well, first of all, I would say if you really look at the Bonita Springs High School situation, with one of the ones that gets brought up in terms of being criticized, that at the end of the day, that was just a bad estimate. And it's not even a cost overrun. It was a bad estimate, which resulted in us improving our process. So the final product of Bonita Springs High School, just as an example, is one that we're delivering a building that from a cost per student station perspective is right in the middle of the state. So it's very, very typical. And it's actually superior to what you're going to see in, like, let's say Charlotte County. We're somewhere between $6,000 and $12,000 below what you might see at Lima Bay High School in terms of its cost per student station. Now, if you look at our financial track record, you can look no further than our audits. We have clean audits. Our financial audits for the last 10 years have been very clean. Our operations audits have had, if we have findings on operation audits, it's something that we don't have substantive findings. So we've even done an efficiency audit to even improve beyond that. We're highly audited, highly accountable. And to be transparent, we take our audit results and literally post them on our website so citizens can view them for themselves. So it's not just my word, it's actually out there on the web for you to see.
And leeschools.net, and they can find it there?
That's right. Mm-hmm. They can find it there.
And so we've gone over how we got here, a significant decrease in funding from the state over the past several years.
Correct, yeah.
We've gone over the benefits that this extra money would give us. We've gone over why a sales tax may be a better option than some other options of generating revenue. Mm-hmm. So, but ultimately this comes down to the voters in November. We're giving them the chance to vote on this and let them decide if they want to make this happen or not. So let's say it doesn't happen. What would that mean if this doesn't pass? What would that mean for the district?
Well, I think if it doesn't pass, what it would mean for the district are several different things. First of all, we would have to borrow more money because you still have students that are coming to our district. So you would see us borrowing dollars so that we could build the schools that we really need to build, just so we can have the capacity for the kids that are coming. The second thing, though, we're going to have to make some real tough choices as it relates to maintenance, as an example, because if you look at the dollars that you borrow, it comes out of the same pot of money as your maintenance budget comes from. So the more money we have to use to spend paying back the debt, the less money we would have for paying, paying for school maintenance. So what that means is that we have to make some tough choices. So we may have to replace that roof, replace that HVAC system, but other things might have to be put off or deferred. We wouldn't be able to invest in technology to the degree that we currently do today. So our kids necessarily wouldn't have the best in technology, and we couldn't keep up with the pace that we need to keep up with. We'd have to make some tough choices when it comes to how we harden and secure our buildings. And then finally, you're really looking at a situation where you're going to have to deploy more portables. Not a good option, and something that in the case of a hurricane, that's where we see a lot of damage. It's also not the most secure facility, but something that we would have to do because it's a cheaper short-term solution. But I think there's a better solution out there.
And again, if it were to pass, it wouldn't last forever.
Right. It would not last forever. We purposely put a sunset of 10 years because that allows the taxpayers of Lee County to evaluate the effectiveness of this and whether or not we are continuing to grow at the rate. If we're no longer growing at that rate, then there would not be that need to continue something like that.
So if estimates are correct and it generated about $59 million a year over 10 years, it's $590 million if my math is correct.
Right.
So that would give us enough to cover that estimated budget shortfall that we would be facing. You mentioned that if it were not to pass, that we would have to borrow more money. Mm-hmm. Can you put into more perspective what that would mean if we had to continue to keep borrowing more money?
Well, just to give you an example, right now we are paying about $50 million in debt out of that cap. So if you have $120 million in your capital budget per se, which is approximately what ours is right now, already you're taking $50 million of that and you're putting toward debt. The rest of it you can put toward maintenance and new construction. Now, if you borrow more money, then you're going to have to pay more of those dollars in debt. So right now we have close to $500 million in debt. If we take that $478 million delta and borrow all that, that's almost another $500 million in debt, which means another $50 million in debt service. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that those dollars would eat away at the dollars that we would have to maintain your building. So you'd be taking your maintenance budget and potentially eventually cutting it in half, or your technology budget and cutting it in half.
And all that money is just going into a bank.
Going to a bank, probably out of Lee County somewhere. And I would say that a better investment would be to invest here in Lee County.
Okay. I see you're wearing your "I voted" sticker,
right?
So, and I've heard you say before that we can't tell people how to vote,
right?
But one of your big messages to the people out there in Lee County is just to educate themselves and to vote, just to get out and vote.
That's right. Yeah, just get out and vote. Be a responsible voter. Someone who does their homework and finds out the information they need, whether it's on this issue. And I encourage people, find out pros and cons on any issue that you're going to vote on, and also on candidates. I think it's just responsible. So we want to, as an employer and as somebody who educate students to really be a good example in terms of what it would be to be I think a good citizen and to exercise your civic duty and to get out there and vote.
November 6th?
November 6th.
If you haven't voted already, I know early voting has already happened.
Right.
And another thing that I failed to bring up was people might be interested in we want to be transparent with people and monitoring, if it were to pass, how the money would be spent. We would be setting up an oversight committee. Right. Where do we stand with that, and what would that involve? Who would be on it? If you can tell me where we are.
Yeah, we do have a citizens oversight committee that would be comprised of citizens of our community that would literally be selected, by our school board, and those people would be reporting really to the citizens of Lee County, at least annually, on how these dollars are being spent. And then they would be making recommendations as to whether or not we would continue. Even if we got, let's say, 5 years into this and growth, really leveled off and we didn't need the dollars anymore, this committee would be recommending to our school board that we would go, that we would no longer levy this type of a tax. So this is a group of outside people that are accountable to no one other than the citizens of Lee County that will be watching and reporting on how this budget is being spent, and making sure that if you look at the project list, we had to put out there, this is what the dollars would be spent for, on these things. So it can't be spent for anything else. We can't spend it on salaries. We can't spend it on pet projects. We have to spend it on what's just on that project list, so that committee would be reporting to the citizens of Lee County that we're doing just that.